Hello. Lovely to see everybody. Welcome to the first of our HR Hot Topics. I'm going to introduce everybody, or let them introduce themselves very soon. Just letting people kind of virtually come in and take a seat if you like. If you're already sitting comfortable, say hi, let us know you're here. The chat bar is on the right hand side. A couple of messages in there as well, and you can connect with our special guest Sharon, who you'll get to meet a little bit later on. I think this is pretty good. We're kind of cooking on gas with people coming in. Hello, Nigel and Alexandra. Paul's obviously here, and Ruth. Lovely to kind of virtually meet you. Right, over to you, Mark. Let's get started.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, or hi if you're in a different part of the world or you're listening back to this on playback. This is our first LavaSource community session. We're really excited to host you all today. We're going to have a chance for you to meet some of the team. We were really keen to make sure when we started off LavasourceHR that we wouldn't just be a website that people came on to and worked with. We wanted to make sure that we connected with our community. We were there for you and were a face in front of the technology. So this is our first chance today to bring ourselves to you and to give you a chance to ask us questions. And some of the LavaSource team are on here today, Claire and Paul, and we've got an amazing guest speaker on, Sharon, who you'll hear a little bit about in our guest speaker slot shortly. There are some polls that we will be doing today so that we can make sure that you're getting your views across in terms of the key things that are important to you. And also, if you can see the little ask a question section on the bottom right, anything that you have by way of a question now, please do feel free to ask. And if you think of something after today, we've got our contact details that we'll share separately with you. Contact us at LavasourceHR.com. We'll send that out separately so that you've always got an opportunity to speak with us at any point. Apart from that, I think that we will just give everybody 1 or 2 more moments to join, because we can see lots of people just literally coming through. We'll give it another 30 odd seconds and then we'll start with the first session. If anything, by the way, is super interesting to somebody today and they'd like to talk about it either in this session or in the next session, you can also put that on Ask a Question. And we'll make sure that if we don't cover it today, we'll come back separately, or we'll put it on an additional session in our next month's bulletin. Nice to see so many faces that I remember, by the way, and also nice to see lots of new faces that I don't know. And hopefully, if some of my colleagues don't know them, then it's brand new to all of us, which really shows that some of our messaging and some of the content and what we're trying to do is reaching the communities that we're hoping to. So that's really positive early news for us.
That's really good. I think, yeah, we've got sort of 25 people already in the room with us, so that's really great. Good to see you all.
Fantastic. So it's literally just coming up to 5 past. Hopefully that's enough time for most people to have joined, got settled. And so Claire, over to you, please.
So thank you. Yeah, we're going to kick off the agenda, I suppose, with a little bit of an overview, really. I'm talking to Mark, going to get to grips with what LavasourceHR is here to do. We're then going to have a quick sort of whistle-stop tour, introduce, obviously, myself in a little bit more detail, but also wonderful colleague, Paul, as well. And then we're going to sit down and have a really lovely chat with Sharon, an amazing expert in her field, but also as well someone that I think that you will all really kind of warm to. As I kind of said this to Sharon before, I've probably got only as many t-shirts as she has in terms of her area of expertise. So it's going to be a really interesting chat as well as we get to understand her experience and her life as an independent practitioner. So yeah, over to you, Mark. If you want to do the rounds and do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so thank you, Claire. So I'm Mark Brooks-Lewis, and I founded LavaSource back in April of this year. I will let Claire and Paul introduce themselves, then Sharon, and then perhaps we can go into the first set of questions.
You want to go first, Paul?
I'm more than happy to go after you.
Okay, well, for those that don't know me, I've been, I say, knocking around the recruitment and talent technology businesses for about 15 years now. So leading marketing functions on an international scale. Here at LavasourceHR, advisory CMO. So I get to work on the product, the go-to-market strategy, and also as well listening into what the community really needs and hopefully providing the answers to your questions, not just through the HR hot topics, but also as well through our service and our platform moving forward. So it's lovely to meet you all.
Thanks, Claire. Paul, I'm heading up the customer success part of the journey for LavaSource. I have been in the recruitment industry for well over 20 years, but despite that, I'm still younger than Claire and Mark. That's only a joke, by the way. So worked both in-house for organisations, for one of the biggest engineering and defence companies in the UK, and also worked for a number of different agencies as well. So just been in and around the recruitment sector for what feels like a lifetime. So really delighted to be part of the team and happy to share any insights or any thoughts or experiences.
Thank you both. Sharon, did you just want to briefly introduce yourself? I know we'll have a longer session later, but if you can just say hi to everybody and a little about your background.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully I'm always praying when I say hello that my voice doesn't sound like garlic and my broadband in lovely London is playing ball today. I'm delighted to come to be joining you as your special first guest. I'm feeling the pressure a little, but I'm going to try and relax because I know I'm in good hands. So I'm Sharon Green. I'm a professional interim consultant and have been for the last 15 or so years. Before that, I did have a permanent life in people, line management, project management, working across lots of different sectors. And I think I'll leave it there because I don't want to spoil the fireside chat, guys. So I'll just leave it there and hand it back to you, Claire.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. And just before I hand over to Claire so that we can get the background on LavaSource to you, I would like to say on behalf of the guys at LavaSource that are part of our wider team in a number of different countries that have helped to set up where we are today and support the early part of our journey. Thank you to all of you. Some of them are in the room. You can't see them. Some of them are in various parts of the world. And it's been as a result of all of your hard work that we've been able to get here today to be able to present our journey thus far. So thank you to everybody that's been supportive up until this point and looking forward to your continued support and working with you. So Claire, let's move on to session one.
Okay, well, let's start with a little bit more of an introduction to you, Mark. I think we've managed to kind of give our histories in a quick sentence. What about yours? Tell everybody what you've been up to through your work lifetime.
It has been a lifetime, actually, longer than Paul's, I think. So I've been in and around HR technology, HR consulting for the past 20 years, building and running shared service centers, and most of the jobs that we have on our platform I seem to have done at one point or another. So hopefully some of my experience and what it was like to do those roles will be part of the emotion, the feeling, the reality of what people have on a day-to-day basis, and that will help us to shape the service that we provide people. But I think that the key thing for me is that all of the experience that I've got is dwarfed by the experience of the people around this table, and hopefully the pool of incredible talent that we've got on the LavaSource community, so that we can turn this into, I think you called it a movement, Claire, and I think ultimately that's what I'd like it to be, so that people really can connect with their hearts and minds into what we're trying to achieve, which is to hopefully bring some hope and prosperity to people who work with us on the platform, and to allow clients to really access the talent that we're hoping to bring them at the right price, the right time and quality, of course, which are super important. So my entire background in a nutshell, and hopefully that's enough detail. But if anybody's interested, the LinkedIn profile is separate.
Brilliant, thank you. So let's kick off then. Let's, in a nutshell, tell everybody what LavasourceHR is all about.
Thank you. So this 20 years that I talked about, it feels like a long time, and I've had some wonderful experiences. I've been really lucky that I've been able to travel around the world and meet some really fantastic people on that journey, and I can see a number of them are on this call. So it's great that people are still talking to me after all that time. I take that as a positive. During that time, though, I noticed some themes, and I'm only going to cover 3 key themes at the moment. There are many more, but certainly there were 3 things that continued over that 20 years to remain the case. From my HR experience, it never felt like there were enough hours in the day, never felt like there were enough people in the HR team, and it never felt like we were ever in control. And that's been the case in every single HR organization that I've been part of during that entire time. And that's largely, of course, because the business demand is variable, and everything that we do in HR is with a static, fixed model of resourcing. Even when we use some external consultants or resources, and have an annual HR calendar, the next new big thing that comes in forces the HR team to reprioritize, and it can be a very chaotic life to live in. We are change experts as a consequence of that, and people tend to work many more hours in a day and in a week than they're paid for to make all of that process work. That was the case when I started in HR 20 years ago, and still remains the case today. So that's my theme 1. The second one is that relates to transformation programs as well. From a technology perspective, many of the transformations, of course, include a large technology component, whether it be Workday, Oracle, SAP, Phenom. There's a number of really brilliant, wonderful HR technologies out there, and they all call upon the demand and the time of HR, and that's the people who work in HR as well as the project teams, and getting good quality resources either on a planned basis or unplanned, however good the individual network someone has. It's really stretched because everybody's looking for the same resources, and you're limited to, at least I seem to always be limited to, the people I knew and all the wonderful recruiters I knew. So that was theme 2. There's always a stretch on the resources who support HR and the projects as well. And the final one is that the client-centric nature of the relationship between HR tech and the work that people do remains as valid now as it did 20 years ago. Even though we've got remote working, many of the sourcing channels, many of the people who HR directors and HR program managers are looking for and working with their recruiter network are the same people over and over again. So being able to get access to talent that was outside of that network, I always found the challenge from my side. And even though we collaborate more now, and the fact that COVID has changed the way that people work, there's still a real emphasis on the old school, if you like, way of finding resources. So those 3 themes, I think, are really important, and they impacted me as an individual and all the people that I knew. And I don't feel that that's dramatically changed in the last 20 years. So what I did at the beginning of this year was to really think through, there must be other people with greater minds than mine, and there are 3 that I can see in front of me, but there are many more around the world. And I thought somebody else must be thinking the same thing as me. There must be a different answer to this. What's happening in the future of work? And as part of that research, I found a concept called talent marketplaces, and I must confess, I didn't know a lot about talent marketplaces at the time. I didn't realize that 80% of the Fortune 500 were either using freelancer.com or Upwork or Fiverr, some really well-known talent marketplaces that basically, for anyone that's ever used a marketplace before, just do the same thing as eBay or Amazon, but they do that for talent. And I thought, this is a great idea, but it's all very generic. It's quite hard to find what I was looking for. So I thought, if we built one single talent marketplace for the HR community, that would allow me as an individual to find the talent I'm looking for, and me as an individual that's looking for work to find the clients that I'd like to reach. And that's where the background to LavaSource came from, just with a set of real life examples of what was causing me a problem and the people that I knew worked in HR, and a chance to create a platform and a new way to perhaps fix those old problems.
Okay.
You're on mute. Okay.
It's one of those amazing things. It doesn't matter which platform I'm on, I always manage to mute myself at the wrong time or unmute myself at the wrong time. You think after all this practice, I'd get better by now, but that's the story of my life. Right, so that's LavasourceHR. It's a talent marketplace specifically built for the HR, change management, and HR tech communities. What's, in a nutshell, the kind of reasons why someone would want to kind of come and use it? You kind of alluded to the fact that you needed resource, you wanted to be able to find the right people at the right time, but is there more of a mission? I think you mentioned a little bit of hope at the beginning as well. Like, what's the mission and purpose really behind it? I want to get into the sort of the emotional reasons why we're all here today.
Yeah, being Welsh, I can do emotion. Look, usually there's rugby involved, but I think we can apply the same to LavasourceHR, because I feel that strongly about it. So I think in terms of purpose, that's pretty simple. It's just creating an opportunity to allow talent to connect with clients and vice versa, and to make sure that that pool is sufficiently large for scale to really make it something that could bring that hope and prosperity to people, irrespective of where they are. This is the kind of concept, I think we call it chicken and egg. Neither comes first here. We need both for the actual venture to be successful. There needs to be enough talent for customers to feel confident that if they post jobs, there'll be people there at the kind of time scale and at the price that they're looking to get that resource, and vice versa. If you're an independent or you're a freelancer and you're looking for extra work, what you want is some really interesting clients that you can either do something different to what you do on a day-to-day basis. You can earn some extra money, but ultimately it needs to be something that really connects and gives you something different to what you're doing today, to make that change something that makes sense to put the effort into. So simplicity around the connection is important. I think that in terms of a vision, if I go back to the concept that I talked about earlier in terms of HR people working hard, most of the people that I know who worked in HR and on projects would easily work 10, 15, 20 hours extra per week, and that would be part of the perceived work contract. It would be wonderful if we can create an opportunity for those individuals to, rather than give away that time to their existing employer for free, which is effectively what's been happening for the entirety of my career, and probably for a lot longer than that, to turn that into some commercial value, so that 15 or 20 hours or whatever the number is per week could be sold to other clients, not just from a commercial perspective, but also challenging themselves in terms of applying their knowledge into a new functional area or a new industry. Let's say I've been a HR business partner for, I'm going to pick one client, Mars, and doing a really great job for 15 or 20 years, but then thinking, could I apply this to another company? That's a lot of connectivity and emotion tied into moving away from that client, and that's part of this whole great resignation, that we think there's another option here. You don't need to change. Maybe you can just spend one day spread over 3 or 4 days working for one or more clients in a new industry, get some new perspectives, challenge yourself to see if that knowledge and experience that you've gained can apply to another market or industry. And that hopefully will give people confidence to know that they are marketable, and that 15 or 20 hours is worth something. And that hopefully will change the nature of the work contract relationship with the existing employer, who will be forced to also recognize the same thing, which, again, for 20 years, I haven't seen a whole lot of that.
Okay, and what about the audience then? Like, we talk about a talent marketplace. This is very much around the sort of HR community, but who exactly would benefit from LavasourceHR?
And I think that's a great question. I think it's as broad as it's long, to use a very UK-centric example there. I think if I look at from a client perspective, it's everybody who has need for either HR support, whether that's policies and procedure support, recruitment, the core HR components. If you're putting in a new HR system and you're looking for guidance on which system to select, or support in putting a solution in place, or even maintaining it, that whole piece around technology change, and that doesn't matter if it's an Oracle database administrator or it's a test manager for SAP, as long as the role supports the world of HR, we'll find it on here, because that's our one single item that we constantly will be asking people to remind themselves of. We're creating a world for HR. We don't want to create a world for finance or other places, because then we'll water down the simplicity of come here to find things to do with HR, and that's really important from a community perspective. And I think that the actual industries don't make a great deal of difference either. I think some of them are highly have a high degree of compliance tied into them. So pharmaceuticals, financial services, it can be quite hard for independents to be able to break into those areas, and it will be hard for us as a marketplace as well to go through all of the areas of compliance and all the legal requirements that procurement teams have to really open up some of those doors. And I think some of what we'll see is a maturing of sourcing for new talent, and some of that will take some time. So I think that there are some real key opportunities and key things that people can benefit from in the short term, and some things that will just take some time, as it took a long time for us all to get used to buying things from eBay and Amazon.
I think if you were in my house, it took no time at all to adjust to digital shopping. But that's another story for another day. Thank you so much. If anybody else has got any additional questions for Mark and us from LavaSource, there is a green button down at the bottom that takes you off to the LavasourceHR.com site. You'll get some more information about us, what we're doing, how we're working, but more so you can register as a freelancer, independent practitioner, or even register some roles up there as well for the community that's already in play with us right now. And yeah, thank you again, Mark, for kind of giving us that overview. I'm going to hand over now to Paul, who's probably more than qualified to talk to Sharon and get some details from Sharon around her experience. Just another kind of quick housekeeping. If you have got questions, I can see the comments coming through and they look amazing. Really great, some suggestions there. Ruth's talking about CIPD back in 2013. So maybe we can come back onto those sorts of topics as well during the chat with Paul and Sharon. But more so as well, if you've got any additional questions, there's the Ask a Question button, and we're going to have some time for Q&A as well throughout the rest of this. So I'm going to minimise my screen now and drop off and hand over to Paul. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted that Sharon has joined the podcast. I was trying to think this morning, Sharon. I think we've known each other about 7 or 8 years. So I was implementing a managed service offering and transforming the recruitment function in a financial services institution. And Sharon worked on the client side, so she represented the client. I've never met a contractor who was as brutal, as thorough, as on the ball in all my entire life. She gave me a really hard time. So that stigma, thinking that you're working with a contractor and you're going to get an easy ride as a supplier, could not be further than from the truth as the time when I worked with Sharon. So Sharon, thank you so much for joining us. Normally when we do these things, and we had the debate beforehand, do we look at client data first, or do we, home in on what it's like from an independent contractor perspective? And we're really keen to get the voice from contractors in the first instance. So I'm going to dive straight into the questions with you to pick your brains, if you don't mind. So just tell me, how did you make the transition? I think you said you've been set up as an independent freelancer contractor for 15 years. How did you make that transition, and what made you make that transition?
Ooh, how did I make the transition? Well, I came to a bit of a career crossroads, I guess you'd say. So I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do next in my career? And recruiters were all suggesting more of the same, I guess. And I changed sector in my permanent career, and I'd also changed careers, so I wasn't always in HR. And so I felt that I was ready for a bit of a challenge. I wanted to test myself, I guess. And so I think I'd had my third boss in about 6 years. And I'd been acting up as joint head of HR when my third boss arrived. And I just decided that if I'm going to give it a go, I might as well give it a go now. So I resigned and I set up in business. And also I wanted to be one of those people who was always in love with their job. I know it sounds, I love my job. I always want to be in love with my job. And so I didn't want to fall out of love with my job. And I think I was probably at a time when that might have happened. So I just resigned and set up my company, and here we are.
Do you think you've been more in love with your job since you went independent than what you were as a permanent employee?
I've always been, like I said, I've always been in love with my job. Lots of my friends and family think that's a bit strange, but I love what I do. And I think there was probably a time when that might have been at risk, I guess. And since then, I mean, I still love what I do. You know, and that's really important to me. It's important to be passionate about what I do and feel that I'm making a difference. And so, I still love what I do. It's a bit rocky at times, don't get me wrong, you know, but I love what I do.
So I'm going to ask you a separate question, just to dispel the myth. Then you can still love what you do and feel as passionate about it by being an independent professional versus being a permanent worker.
Yeah, I think that what's quite interesting, and what I love actually as part of the challenge, is that I think a lot of people have preconceptions about what an independent or a freelancer or a contractor. I would always call myself an independent professional interim, and that's just because I like to be a bit fancy. But I think people often feel that maybe you might lack commitment, you might be less interested in the client's long-term goals, you might be maybe a little bit less concerned about the project that you're working on and how that might last beyond the longevity of the time that I'm there. But I think of myself as somebody who is accompanying the client on a part of the journey. And what I really love is being able to go back to that client and see the legacy of the work that I've done. So I think that I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but basically, I'm very interested in creating a lasting positive trail with my clients, and so I'm as committed as I would be if I was permanent. I'm just there for the journey, for part of the journey, not for the whole journey, and I think, but it's still important to be interested in the long term.
Yeah, totally agree. So what do you think is the 3 most successful things then, in terms of, you know, your success and you being able to operate for such a long period of time as an independent professional interim? I hope I got the phrase right there, by the way. What's your secret, Sharon?
Oh God, it's a bit like Kung Fu Panda, isn't it? The secret sauce. The secret sauce. Well, I think I've probably already said. I think. For me, I think there's a consistency and a professionalism that you need to have when you're, when you're doing any job, whether it's an interim, consultancy, freelance, permanent, whatever, and to leave that positive trail. I think it's also really important to be open to opportunities. I mean, the reason why I'm sitting here, like today, is because we work together in different parts with the same client. But it's about, you don't know where the opportunities are going to come from. So I think it's really being important to be open to that. And I think of networking, I always say networking is building your network one conversation at a time, and that kind of really works for me. I also think it's really important to be honest about what you can deliver, what you can't deliver, and I think those things are the things that have stood me in good stead over the 15 years that I've been working in this way. But I think there are some other kind of practical considerations that I'd say if you're wanting to set off on this life. There are some very practical and pragmatic things that I'd kind of would be my kind of 3 things that I would say to consider. But those are the things that are my kung fu secret, my secret sauce, as it were. That would be what I'd say.
And if there were people thinking about setting up as an independent professional, what are the 3 things that you would give them in terms of advice, the 3 things that you'd say you must consider this before you do it?
Yeah, well, I think of it, run it like a business. It might be a micro business. So it might be, just a solo, or working with yourself and recommending, other people, for example, that might be able to do stuff. So run it like a business. So you need to think of finances, cash flow. I found it super helpful to kind of work out, look, how much money do I need and to survive and thrive, and then consider that as a pricing model, just like you would if you were pricing anything else like a product. And so run it like a business is my first one. The second thing is, I think, what do you need to be personally good at work? So you're running your own business, so you need to think about, what do I personally need to be able to work well? Which I think is it teaches you the things that are really important to you in order to be able to survive and thrive. And the final thing for me is about learning and connecting. So it's really, really critical to keep current, to iterate, and your business and your offer is to really invest in your network and keep extending it. It's so critical to have that as part of a small business, particularly. So yeah, those are the 3 things.
Okay, perfect. What would you say is the hardest thing or the biggest challenge you've ever faced being an independent professional?
I think there were 2 things that I kind of. The first one is a personal thing. So I'm the cliche, really. I'm in the people business because I love people, and so I think the biggest thing, and the reason why I have this side hustle. I run this HR interim networking group, and the reason why I've done that for such a long time, during the time that I'm an interim, is because people are my thing. When I left work as a permanent person, I knew I'd miss people, so I have to have them. It's like, with my clients, I like to make that personal connection, and just people, I need to be around people. So my network is really important to me. And then the second thing is more of a macroeconomic thing. The hardest things have been facing the ups and downs. So financial crisis, change in, kind of legislation like IR35, for example, the effect that's COVID, Brexit, IR35. They're like buses, these things sometimes, and so navigating your way through that as an independent, it's a bit hard.
Well, hopefully we'll not have too many of those buses turning up again in the next few years. I think we've had enough.
Exactly.
What would you say has been the most rewarding piece of work or project or gig that you've worked on, Sharon?
Are you going to expect me to say the one that we worked together on?
Excluding the one with me.
I think this is, when this question was muted, I kind of thought it was a bit like, I don't have children, but it's a bit like, if picking your favorite child. My clients, all of them have provided lots of rich learning, I think. So understanding the people you get on really well with, the projects that you do really well, and conversely, the people who you find most challenging. But for me, it's taught me a lot about the situations that I bring the most value to, And for me, one of the beauties of working in this way is the ability to work with different sectors and different clients with different needs and different challenges, and that's the thing that always keeps me fresh. So every client really has the potential to be a really rewarding gig for me, you know, and that's what keeps me doing what I do.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess my last question, Sharon, if you look at research by people like Gartner, they're forecasting that between 35 and 40% of the workforce are going to have more than one job by 2025. Some of the research that's come out recently predict that number's going to be a lot higher. So this is definitely part of the workforce that is going to grow. Why do you choose to stay operating as an independent professional?
I think you've got to, maybe now more so than 15 years ago when I started, where I did honestly feel that it was a little bit like stepping off. And I still remember the feeling of not getting a paycheck at the end of that first month. You know, it was quite scary. Whereas now I think the workplace is much more fluid. So I think that what keeps me doing it is the challenge and the calculated risk, and being in charge of my own career, and that's really what keeps me going, and the ability to keep that navigation. So it's opened up for me personally a lot more opportunities to grow, develop, hone my skills, put myself into new areas, so that there's something, it feels like a calculated risk, and I enjoy that. But you can never say never, and I think that's probably the future potential for people, is what you're trying to do, which is to facilitate people who maybe have some space in their permanent job and want to stretch themselves, or people who want to be independent like myself, or people who want to move between a permanent and independent life. And I think that's probably the future. It looks a lot more flexible and looks a lot more self-navigated, which is really exciting and interesting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's, you know, it's well documented that in, you know, most countries everybody seems to be struggling with skills availability and candidate availability. Skills being high, skills demand being high, and candidate availability being low. So opening up different channels and looking at different pockets of the workforce, not just in those countries but globally, I think is what organisations are going to have to do more and more of in order to survive and meet their internal demand. That's thank you very much. You've given some really great answers there, and I think we may have one or two questions from Claire or Mark, if they're able to join. Come back in and join.
I don't have any more questions. I think we were going to move to a poll in a moment if Claire's technical skills are greater than mine. But I just wanted to thank Sharon for that real honest appraisal of what life is like to be an independent professional. I don't remember the exact term you used, but it did sound posh, Sharon. I might have to write that down and put that on my LinkedIn profile. But that was, I think, what we were really hoping to get today, is a real life example from somebody who is living the life of being an independent professional. And we wanted to perhaps give a little different perspective to some of the sessions that I think we've all been on over the last 18 months, where it can be a very similar view from people, often at the top of organizations that may not necessarily go through some of the same challenges that we have on a day-to-day basis. So Sharon, thank you so much for doing that. And I'm sure that in a moment there will be some additional questions from our community. But if we can pause there and allow Claire to organize the first poll. Just to, in fact, I'll let Claire explain how the poll works as well, because I know you will do this better than me.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks again, Sharon. Yeah, it was really insightful. So up on screen right now, you should see the first of our polls, which is, do you see yourself having more than one job by 2025? And so, yeah, I'm wondering whether or not you can see that and then cast your votes. There we go. I think also as well, it's really interesting. Having worked in and around this sector for like the best part of sort of 15 years now, coming out of the legal sector into what I would call talent recruitment, people space. I know, I mean, my own career as well has kind of mirrored Sharon's to an extent, in that, you know, I kind of had probably 10 years of being employed by one potential employer, but actually getting caught up in helping people, supporting other people in my communities and networks. And I think as well, when I took the leap 4 years ago to set up on my own, it wasn't so much around the kind of control of my career. I kind of figured that I could probably fast track to my retirement rather than actually just being made redundant or not having that control was one of my main drivers. And actually, to Sharon's really early point of being able to just to do the job that I really love doing, rather than actually getting caught up in the sort of commercial politics of working and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of conversation that we can probably draw out from the communities there, and I'd be interested in hearing other people's stories. So drop me a line, let me know what your experiences have been. I think undeniably we can say that 72% of the people here today will see themselves having more than one job, or working on more than one project at a time in literally less than, I suppose, 3 years' time, if you're not doing it already. So thank you for that. That's interesting. There's the other questions that we've got around the gig economy, and also as well our topics that are coming up. But before I jump onto those, what I'd like to do is talk to Sharon. Just one more question I had kind of popping up, which is in terms of how you professionally continue to develop when you're in gigs or you're kind of taking projects on. How do you stay up to date with your professional development as an independent, an interim leader?
That obviously there's a balance of time, but I think if it comes back to running, this is a business, so you have to invest in your business in order for it to thrive. So I give myself a CPD budget, a continuing professional development budget, just like you might have if you were in a company. And each year I kind of think about what am I going to invest in this year, and try and hold myself to task. I'm really involved in, I'm very active on social media. You wouldn't believe that Twitter is actually a useful source of learning, believe it or not. I get a lot of value from my network. So the HR Interim Network group that I run gives me an awful lot of learning back. And then there's fantastic things like this now. Last week I was at a conference on racial, anti-racism and racial equity, all online, completely vibrant education and learning. And so it's a combination of things, as well as lots of reading, lots of connecting with people, working out what topics I need to invest in, what skills I need to invest in. So I probably do a lot more of it now than when I was in-house. There was quite a lot on offer that I might have not necessarily been able to take advantage of, but now it's a commercial imperative to keep current. So I really do set aside lots of time to invest in that, to think about what's next.
That's brilliant, thank you. I think that's really sage advice, actually, and it's definitely something that I try and do. The new working practices of being as flexible as you can be, but working from home, no office environment and distractions. I'm like you, I miss people terribly. So any opportunity to get out and about, kind of draw the line at opening of an envelope, but I'm pretty much at everything else, I think. But in terms of kind of that continued connection, it must have changed for you over this last 18 months, and the world over. I think everybody's adjusted to different work practices, whether that's hybrid working, remote working, or even virtual working. Have you got any kind of additional sort of advice for people if they're considering breaking out on their own, or even just thinking about how do they build that sort of additional time frame into their workday without actually tipping the balance?
Oh, wow, there was a lot in there, Claire.
Sorry, I do like to throw in a good question now and again.
I think the thing, if I start with what have I noticed? I mean, obviously I've been working this way for like 15 years, so I've always had a home office. I have to say clients have been varying degrees of how hybrid they wanted to go pre-pandemic. So I think there's probably a big shift in people's comfort potentially with having people remote. I've just finished my first kind of gig that I never went into the client's office and I never saw them in real life, and that was properly strange. I'm not. I would prefer a blend personally, but I think that one of the things that it is about getting a balance, and it is for me about carving out time so that you're getting the balance between delivery to your current clients and thinking about investment for the future. And I think when I was at the start of my career as an interim, that was a difficult balance to strike. I think the more work you do and the more you realize that you have to invest for the future, the easier it is to carve out time for things that perhaps doesn't bring money into your business bank account, but actually is an investment in your future bank account. And that comes with confidence and track record and knowing that you're going to get work, I think. Then you're able to carve out the time a little bit better.
I think that's a really excellent point, Sharon. And I've seen a couple of comments that Alison and Glenn have sent through as well. And I think some of this comes from where you are in your career and how to manage those client conversations, because clearly focusing on, as Alison and Glenn have said, and others I think already, it's about the outcomes and getting the client to focus on what you deliver for them, not where you deliver that work and how often you're sitting in front of them. Now, we all know, at least those of us who've been around for as long as the people on the top half of this call, I'm just putting you in that bracket there, Paul. It takes a long time to gain the confidence to be able to turn around to a client and to be able to manage that conversation. But when you do, it allows you to generate time within the week to be able to carve out those special moments that you talked about, Sharon, so that any training or any other opportunities or working for other clients to be able to balance what you'd like to do from an individual perspective as well as the commercial side, and of course demonstrating to all the relevant tax authorities that you're complying in the proper way, which is of course not unimportant, but really thinking about that outcome-based delivery, and that's one of the things we'd really like to stress through the community here. Whatever help people need in terms of the experience that the people on this call today and the community that are dialed in and the wider LavaSource HR community, if there are questions that people have about how that worked for them or any challenges that people have and any suggestions on what we can do as a community to help individuals to overcome those hurdles, what does good look like, but from a practical, real life perspective, that's the kind of thing I'd really like to see us do as a community, so that we can be helping one another to be successful, and then the strength of the LavaSource HR family will hopefully shine through and turn into something akin to prosperity that I mentioned at the outset.
That's brilliant. And it also brings us on to the next poll. Very nicely segued there, Mark. Thank you for that. So next poll is, what do organisations need to do to take advantage of the gig economy? And I think there's been some great comments in the chat as well, in terms of Alison suggested that she'd love to be able to have a couple of gigs running simultaneously. take it from one that is right now doing that. It's really hard. I think there is that element of, you know, both projects that I'm working on currently are really, I suppose, high concentration, high intensity, and they're both all about speed. So it is about being able to kind of distract yourself from one and put yourself into another. I'd find it really difficult if I was doing what I know your jobs are, where there's actual people involved. I'm quite lucky that I get to, you know, kind of put down a brand and it doesn't come kicking and screaming telling me that, you know, it needs more time and energy from me. Whereas actually, I think working with the kind of organizational structures, the nuances of people and processes, I think there's much more there that's actually, you know, it's a higher intensity role. But I think all organizations right now, if they're not considering the advantages of plugging into the gig economy, are really doing themselves a disservice. And actually, I think that there's a real starting point with the people who are in charge of the people strategies within organizations.
It's
So
quite there are answers on this, Paul. It's quite interesting. I see that most people have, or nearly 50% of people have looked at skills rather than job descriptions, and that's one of the things that hopefully we see change over the course of the coming years. I, for one, have seen far too many very long job descriptions in my life working in HR, and the view often of the business looking into HR is that we often spend far too much time on job descriptions rather than helping. So there's a working smart rather than working hard that I think is great to see here. And we'll leave people finish off the vote. And then there's just one more poll to quickly put up, and then we'll definitely pause for Q&A because we don't want to run out of time before we ask what our audience are really interested in. So let's pull a...
Okay, this is the final poll then. So, excuse me, I've got a terrible cough, but over the next couple of months, we're going to be regularly checking in with you, and we'd love to discuss some more really impactful topics. These are the 4. Sorry, Mark, if you can just finish off for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can scroll down the poll section, there's 4 items in there. We're looking to run a session on each of them, but what we wanted to know is which is most important to you, our audience, so that we can prioritize them on that basis. And what we'll do in between time is we'll share some information in a bit more detail to let you know exactly what that content is going to be about, and the guest speakers that are going to be coming on. It'd be wonderful, of course, if we could get David Ulrich on to talk about the flexible future of HR and give him our perspective on how we can advance the model that has been semi-working okay for a long time, but we know around the edges is it's when it's put under pressure with the demand being variable that tends to be where it falls down. But the concept of a partner model is one that most organizations are still using, so we know that the bedrock is strong. Looks like that a blended workforce of HR and technology is strongly winning through on this one, so that's giving us a really cracking steer for which one will come next. And some excellent points coming in there from Glenn in terms of turning the conversation, the narrative, to being more of a service, more of a supplier type engagement rather than the old-fashioned I'm hiring a contractor, because that brings with it a certain expectation of what and how people are going to work. More excellent points from Owen as well. Yeah. And liking the Crowdcast platform, so that's a feather in your cap, Claire, for organising it on this this wonderful platform. So let's pause there. We've got 5 minutes left. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask in this Q&A session, would you like to just pop the question into the Ask a Question?
Yeah, you can do the Ask a Question. We've got one in there already, Mark. I think this is really for you to answer for us. What's the incentive for the client to use the platform?
So great question, Alison. I think first of all, the definition of client is super important here. So that can be an end client like a Mars or a Workday or an IBM. It doesn't really matter as long as it's somebody who's looking for resource that's connected to our platform, i.e. something to do with HR. I think the benefit for them is direct sourcing. This includes recruiters as well, of course, which is an obvious extra channel in addition to job boards and LinkedIn that are currently used, because they know what type of resource they're going to find there and the availability. So that's not an important client, and definitely going to be a partner to LavaSource moving forward. So I think that direct access to clients, the size of the talent pool is going to be greater than any one single organization or recruitment organization can have on their own, or even a supplier in that sense. So the size is going to be important, because having access to the bigger the pool of talent, the more likely it is that you're going to find somebody at the right price, time, and of the right quality. And hopefully the diverse nature of what we're bringing to the table in terms of there being no barriers to entry for people. We didn't want to have subscriptions. We wanted to think about what was the easiest way we could create a platform so that everybody could use it, irrespective of where they are, their monetary circumstances. As long as they had the right skills, they ought to be able to access the clients and vice versa. So simplicity, easy access to talent, and size and big here being beautiful, I think is one of the key things for us. So hopefully, Alison, that answers your question. If not, though, more than happy to follow on with some additional Q&A separately.
I was just going to add to that, Mark, it's just around, particularly from an organizational perspective, organizations have got to start doing something different. You know, they can't keep looking in the same channels. They can't keep, walking the same path. They've got to do something different. And, we've got to now start thinking of the workforce as a global workforce, not just as a UK workforce. And that does mean a shift for HR. It means a shift for traditional HR. Somebody mentioned that word earlier, traditional. I think it means that we've got to start breaking down norms and process and procedures, and we've got to adapt to the new way of working, and we've got to adapt to this global workforce, and that means HR for me has got a big part to play in that.
Brilliant. Ruth just popped a question in, actually, and this is really interesting. So what digital skills and competencies would a less experienced HRM professional need to develop to try and work in this way? Sharon, I'm gonna kind of throw that one over to you, because I don't think that there is a minimum, but you work in this space.
Oh, God, it's a tricky one, because I think there's some bare minimum skills and competencies that you need these days. So you need to be tech savvy, and I think technology is about the platforms that we're using now and being open to experimenting and learning about that. As I've already declared by hand, I'm a big fan of social media and of using technology to showcase your brand. So I think that's really important. And then I think things like data skills, so being able to interpret, look at data and think about trends. I am just obsessed with finding out about tech platforms, and whether that's HR systems, things like Crowdcast, for example. I've got this Bible of any tech that I come across. I just add it to my tech tools list, because you never know when that's going to be handy for me personally, for my business, or for my clients' businesses. So I think that the key thing, though, is that you've got to learn about this and be discerning, because technology is not the silver bullet. There's still quite a lot of technology is there to serve a purpose. So I think it's about being discerning, and that only comes through knowledge and scanning the environment and working out what's good tech and what is not so good tech. So that's what I would say. But ongoing learning, important to be open, and always learning, I think, is key.
Brilliant answer, Sharon. And I think that as we're coming up to the hour and we have to close the event, I think we'll come back and add this question into the next session, because I think there's a fair degree of crossover with the topic that's been selected and that particular question. So Ruth, thank you for that. I think it is one of the key questions that HR should be considering if we're going to look after our own, as it were, and we need to spend some time talking through that. So Sharon, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and looking forward to working with you in the future. Claire and Paul, thank you for your support in putting today's session on. It's been a fantastic session from my side, and hopefully our audience has enjoyed that as well. I can see lots of thank yous coming through, so I think that's a yes. Really looking forward to the next session in 4 weeks' time. And what we'll do, if you can look out on our community pages, which we'll share separately after the event, and Claire will send something out on this. Any questions you have, anything that diolch to Angie, and please do tune in for the next one. But thank you all for joining today. It's been a pleasure to host you, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever in the world you are. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. Take care. Bye-bye.